that's when my world flipped upside down, because now I had all these memories and flashbacks, and then I realized that my childhood was not normal.
What you thought. Are we ready? You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, welcome, Bernadette.
Thank you.
So glad that you are here. I don't know what brought you down here during this season, or how you connected to my sister, but I'm glad you did, because
I think it's a God thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known you were in town, and we wouldn't have been able to connect for today. Thank you for sharing this morning as well. Hope I get to hear a little bit more about that a little bit later. But anyway, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and who is Bernadette.
Ooh.
So we can start there.
So you're going to start at the bottom of the well?
I want to start wherever you want to start, but if it's at the bottom of the well, or the top of the mountain, wherever it is, start.
We got this, girl. So my name is Bernadette Clark. I am a nurse practitioner. I currently have been living for the last year and a half in Port Ellsworth, Alaska.
3.5?
For a year and a half. Past year and a half, I've been in Port Ellsworth, Alaska. Port Ellsworth is a very tiny community that is only accessible by plane. You'll have to travel through a mountain pass to get to me.
Oh, wow.
My husband's never excited about that flight.
What's that flight like?
Well, it's a very small plane, generally. It could be anywhere from a 2-person plane up to maybe about 8 or 9 people, generally. So 204s, 206, a Platus would be the largest plane that usually we fly. Sometimes we'll get on a King Air, which is kind of like VIP status.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's about 55-minute flight from Anchorage out to Port Ellsworth.
Where you are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Through a mountain pass.
Through the mountains. Oh, it's so beautiful. If you ever doubt God's country, I want you to fly through that pass, and then we'll talk.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's really kind of mind-blowing for me to first have this opportunity to talk with you. When I think about, okay, who is Bernadette Yaney? Mm-hmm. That's my maiden name. And I think back to 1,000 memories that flash through my mind, and I don't think at any point in the first 18 years of my life that I would have ever thought that I would be this girl. I was raised in Fort Wayne. I am the youngest of 5 children. I have 4 older brothers. Mm-hmm. My oldest brother was my dad's from a previous marriage, and then I had 3 brothers with my nuclear parents. My father had 4 brothers, and always wanted a sister and didn't have that. So when he began having children, he definitely wanted a daughter, mm-hmm. So he wasn't giving up until he had a girl.
Oh, wow.
Well, the only flip side to that coin is my mother never wanted girls. Oh. So here I am, after 4 boys in a very small home. Now we have this girl.
Nobody.
Yeah, definitely wasn't. It wasn't.
You weren't what they expected.
Right. My dad was super excited. My mom, not so much. My dad worked all the time. My mom stayed at home. She was a seamstress. She quilted. So she was the full-time person at home. Mm-hmm. So, of course, growing up was definitely challenging. Some of my most prominent memories were, you were supposed to be Lane Anthony, not Bernadette Elizabeth.
Oh.
I never wanted a girl.
Oh.
And, growing up in a male-populated home, unfortunately, I underwent 8 years, the first 8 years of my life, being molested by
Oh, wow.
by my brother. So I don't think I was able to conceptualize what was occurring at that time. I think when I turned 13 and I got my first kiss, that's when my world flipped upside down, because now I had all these memories and flashbacks, and then I realized that my childhood was not
Not
normal.
what you thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did have the strength at that time to write a letter to my parents. I couldn't say it out loud, but I did write a letter to them and told them that all the memories that I was remembering and the things that plagued me. And I remember after they read that letter, my mother called me a liar. And she said that I was just trying to get attention. And, and I don't know why. My father, he was there to defend me. He always loved me, and that put a wedge between my parents, because I had a great relationship with my dad. And that was even harder for my mom. And my dad's first reaction is, I'm going to kill him. And they reached out to him. He was a lot older. My oldest brother's 21 years older than I am. And so there was a huge age gap. But they called him, and I'm not sure why, but he told the truth. He said, yeah, he did do that.
Good.
And then my mother was very quick to say, forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us.
Oh, wow.
That hurt.
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic, so I went through CCD as a kid. I was baptized. I went through communion. After I went through communion, church really wasn't a thing anymore. It was like, sometimes people go through life and there's like things you're supposed to do. So you check the box and then you move forward.
You've just been checking off boxes.
Yeah, so they checked off the last box for me was to get, have me go through communion, check the box, and then we
you're done.
really didn't go through church much after that. But in elementary school in 5th grade, there was an opportunity to do the CCD trailer out in the parking lot. So I would go to that because, it was an outlet from school.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, I gleaned from that was, if you memorized this Bible verse, you got a candy bar. And the Bible verse was Psalms 121. I look to the Lord, where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth, right? So I never realized how much my God was still there for me in just that simple act. Though I was there for the candy,
right,
he was preparing me.
Right. Well, he certainly put something inside of you to be able to stand up and even write the letter and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is my truth. And so that was brave.
Yeah. But moving forward, my mom, every time my brother would come home from, for holidays, she'd make sure to set him right beside me.
Oh, my gosh. Is your mom still living?
No, I lost her, let me think, I've been there 1.5 years, so 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, I went through life feeling dirty, feeling less than, not good enough, and not wanted because I was a girl. I wasn't the boy. I think that really shifted my mentality in what I thought was achievable in this life.
Sure.
I never really liked to talk about it, because once I knew that you knew, then we could have been here.
Yeah.
And now I'm down here again.
Right.
So I definitely struggled through my teenage years. Growing up with sexual abuse the first 8 years of my life, I learned that to lose yourself meant you were loved. So, that physical loss was acceptable because the end result was you're okay again.
Yeah.
You know, they'll like you.
They'll like you again.
Yeah.
And anything to be liked.
Anything. Yeah, because, you know, a kid, it's the closest thing to God. They just want to be loved.
That's right.
And
Adults the same.
And I feel like, you know, growing up, God, I just wanted to do anything to make her love me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be good enough. I was never groomed to go to college. My parents were born in the 30s, so, you know, in that generation, you know, you grow up, you graduate high school, you get married, you have kids, and that's your life. Mm-hmm. So I could never really connect with anybody in any type of long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. I became pregnant at 19. That was difficult. I always felt like as my belly grew, it was more and more like the scarlet letter.
Yeah, yeah. Everything your mom thought about you now was true.
Oh, yeah. I just proved her right.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go to stores and, you know, people will look at your belly, and then first thing they do is look at your left hand.
Yeah.
And, of course, I never had that ring on that hand.
And were you living with your mom and dad at this time?
No. The first chance I got to get out of there, I had to for my own mentality, my own sake. So I started, you know, working in a nursing home, and I tried to live with my son's father. That ultimately failed. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that failure stems from the sexual abuse.
Sure. If you haven't dealt with it yet, it's still there. It's still plaguing you, even in the behind the scenes.
So I had an incident that occurred with my son's father that allowed me to open my eyes and say, you can't keep doing this. And I was brave enough to say, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm 100% done. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to figure it out. And then I would think in my head, I look to the Lord. Where does my help come from?
Yeah.
My help comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, that 5th grade daggone trailer is going to come back and save my life.
It is.
And
God has put something in you, because that's the second time now in your life that you've been brave enough to see what it is God wants you to do and then act upon it.
Yeah. So I became a single mom right away. One of the people that God brought into my life were talking about how they were going through this federal housing campaign where you fill out this application and maybe you can get a home for a reduced amount, so you didn't have to pay the exorbitant cost.
Sure.
So I filled out the paperwork, and the grace of God, I got accepted. And it was a rural economic housing development house.
Okay.
I got to build
Like a
my
habitat
own
house.
house. Yes, I was 22 years old.
Wow.
There was 4 plots of land that I could pick from, and I chose the corner of 9th and Walnut right here in town.
There you go. There's that Walnut Street.
Yes. So it was a corner lot. It was huge. I was so excited. And I thought, man, a girl like me, I'm going to have a brand new house. I was 22 years old when my son and I moved into that house.
Oh, neat.
We didn't have much of anything. I think we had a dresser and a couple beds.
Had enough. You had each other.
And then we had garage sales.
Yeah, there you go.
So we moved into that house. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because I knew in that moment that my son was not going to have an opportunity to grow up with a mom and a dad. It was going to be me.
How'd you get to Manchester to begin with?
His father was from here.
His father was from here? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when I got to this little town, well, let me back up just a smidge. My junior year in high school, I was at Northrop High School in Fort Wayne. And my parents had the all-out blood-curdling argument. And I remember being in my room and listening to them just tear each other apart. And I had to pee so bad. Oh, Lord, I had to pee so bad. But I didn't want to go across the hall. Literally, all I had to do was just make it across that hallway to the bathroom.
No man's land.
No man's land. And I opened that door to go out. And as soon as she seen my face, She stopped me dead in my tracks and she said, this is all your fault. I don't even know what they were arguing about at the time, but that was the life that I lived with her.
Right.
There was nothing I could do or say or be to be good enough or be accepted or loved and she looked me dead in the eye and she said, this is all you. And then my dad tried to redirect her and man, that hurt.
Yeah. So how old were you?
Like 17. And she started packing all of her stuff and throwing it in the car. And I had to make a critical decision in that moment. And I wanted her love so bad. I mean, she just hated me my whole life. So in that decision, I went out to my father, who always showed me love, always held me, always let me cry. And I said, Daddy, I have to go with her. I love you, but if I'm going to have any chance of her liking me, I got to go with her.
Wow.
I got to choose her.
Wow.
And he said, okay. So we moved to the campground in Pierceton, Jellystone, and we lived in a trailer in the middle of winter with no running water. We had electricity. We had kerosene for heat. And then I had to change schools my senior year. I went to South Whitley-Whitco.
Okay.
And I went from a population of almost 3,000 in my school down to a couple hundred.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I loved it. I remember the first day I went to school, I had my purse on my shoulder because, in Fort Wayne, you got to dress. And this kid came up to me. He's like, what are you carrying a purse for? And I'm like, well, where do you put your pencils? He points to his ear. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. When you're in Rome, you got to do what the Romans do, right? So I started wearing sweatpants and comfy clothes. And I never carried a purse again. I don't think I got one today, but that's a rare sighting for me. So I went to South Whitley-Whitco, and that's what shifted me toward this area.
Okay.
And then one summer night, cruising through town, I seen this good-looking car, and I was like, dang, that's a really good-looking car. Well, it's bad looking either.
It was the car that got you, huh?
Well, I seen that car, and I was like, it was like a Monte Carlo. It was an 88. It was black. She was beautiful. But then I was like, oh, that driver ain't very bad looking either. So that's what snowballed me into this, and he was from here.
Okay.
So
you ended up on the corner of 9th and Walnut.
So I ended up on the corner of 9th and Walnut.
Built a brand new house.
And then I said, what am I going to do with myself?
Yeah.
My son, I got to make his life better than what I've already created for him.
Absolutely.
So I started trying college. And I worked downtown at the Mainview. And I was going through college, and one afternoon, this old fella came in the door with a cane. He was dressed. He had a sweater on and pants. I knew he must have been somebody important, right? Or came from money or something.
Yeah.
And he sat down at the bar, and it was just him and I in there. And he emptied his pocket of change and a couple bills onto the bar, and he said, I'd like something to eat, something to drink, and I'd like to leave you a tip. I said, well, the good news is I made a lot of money today, so I don't need that tip. So let's focus on. He goes, now I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm only do this one time. I want something to drink, something to eat, and I want to leave you a tip. He goes, so you take that menu and you figure it out. So I said, well, this is what I could do. I could get you a glass of iced tea. I could get you a plate of fries. He goes, oh, that sounds perfect. I said, there's still plenty left for that tip. He goes, let's do that. That sounds great. So when the food came out, he started asking me about my husband. And I was like, oh, I don't have one of those. But me being a proud mama, I was like, but I do have a son. And then I didn't even think he is the same age as my parents.
Oh.
So I just put that scarlet letter right back on my chest. He goes, you don't have a husband? I said, no, I've never been married. And he goes, but you got a bastard son? Oh, Lord, did that echo through my heart. But I knew that his generation, that's what you called them. Though it stung, I went along with it. And I said, well, yes, I do have a very good-looking son. He's just the sweetest thing. And we talked about that, and I wanted to reaffirm myself. So I said, well, I am taking college classes. He goes, well, what are you going for? And I said, phlebotomy. because it's like starting
Yeah.
like IVs and drawing blood. I didn't know anything. I didn't have anybody to push me or groom me. And he goes, "Oh, you're in the wrong field." I said, "I am?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What you need to do is you need to get into histology." I'm like, I don't even know what that word is. He said, folks are always having stuff cut off themselves and they want to know if it's cancer. So basically histology, you remove pieces of skin like moles and then they look at them under a microscope like me. And then he said he was a retired pathologist. So he goes, what you need to do is get you into histology. And that man, he must have been in his 80s. He took my name and my address and wrote it down. And faithfully, he wrote me every month.
Oh, wow.
He would tell me about different schools that were available. You know, most of them were Catholic and convents, but I don't know what I was going to do with the bastard boy.
Yeah.
And then one day he sent me a postcard. He said, I found the place. He said, IU Med in Indianapolis has a program. It's brand new. He said, it's called a teleconference program. So you won't have to move and you won't have to drive down to all your classes. Now, you may have to go down there for things, but not on a routine basis. He said it's brand new. You call them in on the telephone. They send you these CDs. You put them in your computer. And then you have classes. This first teleconference classes. You know, this is like the beginning of like the age that changed everything. And I applied for that course and I was accepted.
Oh, wow.
And, and I just think that's the Lord leading
absolutely.
me. And so I got into histology and the one thing that man told me was, he said, now, the one thing I want you to do, he said, the important part about histology is doing autopsies. He said, you're going to learn more doing that than you ever will in a classroom. So if they ever say you want to do autopsies, you're going to do them. And I said, okay. Forgot all about that conversation. But I got to a point in this class where they said, Bernadette, we need you to find a laboratory because you got to use tissues. I have to start staining tissues and making slides. So I got the big old the yellow pages out, 3 inches thick in Fort Wayne. I went through till I found laboratories and I started going through each one of them. And finally, one of them bit on it. And they set up an interview for me. So I went in, I took my grades because I was a 4.0 student.
Oh, amen.
And then the pathologist asked me, he said, have you ever done autopsies? And then that little old man sitting across from me at that bar was right there with me. And I said, no, but if you let me see one, I'll tell you if I can do them. He goes, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, I guess I'm doing an autopsy.
Oh, wow.
And so I started doing autopsies. And that just really started changing the trajectory of my life and pushing me forward. I ended up doing autopsies for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
was still a pretty male, at that time, still pretty male dominated?
That is really funny you say that because
No, it's
the
not.
guy they said, yes, it is.
Yeah. So here you are in a kind of breaking through.
Yeah, I'm a kid. I'm like 24 years old, a young girl. And they set me up with this guy who's in his 40s to do this autopsy. And, he's pompous.
Yeah.
Oh, he's pompous. And I'll tell you what, this is the wrong girl to come at. I'm scorned, right?
Yeah.
So
you have that scarlet on there. That doesn't mean what they think.
Yeah,
it
but
means
I'm not
something else.
bowing down to no man at this point. I'm like, no way. So we go into the morgue and there's all these bags, right? And of course, you could unzip the body to the point where just the feet come out where the toe tag is and the name, because you got to look for the person you're going to do the autopsy on. No, he wanted to open up the face and flip it open real fast for the startle effect.
Right.
And of course, the first one was kind of like, oh. And then we finally got to the one that was actually ours, and we brought the body out to the table and put it down. And he comes in with this big old cheeseburger from McDonald's, takes a bite out of it, sets it right on the chest of that
Oh, my
feller.
gosh.
And I was like, well, that doesn't look very sanitary. But he just wanted to get that
shock
energy
effect
out of me. And he wanted me to run for the hills, and I wasn't going to do it.
Good for you.
And after that, I dang sure wasn't going to go.
Yeah.
So then we began doing the whole autopsy, and, it's pretty graphic. You open up the chest and slide that knife all the way down the belly and fillet the skin up, and then you take a striker saw, cut through the rib cage, and pull off that chest plate, and now you've got the heart and the lungs exposed, and A lot of people don't make it past the saw going through those rib cages, but that didn't bother
Didn't
me.
bother you?
And I was really fascinated with how God has orchestrated this body
Sure.
and put all those organs in there and how they all work
Yeah.
together. And then we got to the head.
Yeah.
Now, that was a different game because you have to cut from ear to ear behind and then pull the scalp across.
Oh, wow.
And if you think about it, when you're grabbing the scalp to pull it forward, it almost looks like the face is kind of frowning. So, and then you have to dissociate. Okay, they can't feel this, Bernadette. They can't feel this, Bernadette. They can't feel this. And then you take that skull off the head. And, he was just terrible to me. He was terrible. So when you take the back of the skull off, meaning the top section, you see the whole brain in there. And you can grab a hold of the frontal lobe, which is where your forehead is, and you can pull that down. And there's 2 little ligaments. You cut that, and then all of a sudden the brain drops. And there's these 2 little white strings. They look like 2 pieces of white yarn. And he'd go in there and go, well, he's blind now. So now
gosh.
So now I knew those 2 white strings were the optic nerves, right? I was like, that dirty dog. Oh my God, he's so rude.
Yeah.
So needless to say, I survived that autopsy, and I just fell in love with learning. I mean, to see cancer, to see cystic fibrosis, to see cirrhosis of the liver, to see sickle cell anemia, what it looks like in the body, and then to know what it does to the body. I mean, that was the foundation of, I have amazing knowledge in my head.
Sure.
But the market crashed in 2000. And if I back up just a hair more, I did have one fella. I was working in a factory during the week. I worked at the bar on
the weekends?
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings. And then every weekend for 6 years, every Saturday, every Sunday, I did autopsies. So I always had at least 3 jobs.
Yeah.
So I did have one fella in the factory. He asked me if I wanted to marry him, and I was like, well, I'm 28 years old now. I'm like, well, maybe this is the only one. I don't know. And I didn't want to be alone the rest of my life. So, of course, I said yes, and then that was a terrible decision. There was no God in that at all. He was very self-centered, and he had 3 children. So he wanted me to quit my job, and I moved to Akron, Indiana. And now I've got 3 little girls and my son. So my primary goal was, we're going to church. So I went from one church to the next church to the next church.
Oh, wow.
And every time I walked in that door, they all looked at me, and then they looked at the 4 people behind me, and they're like, she don't look like any of them.
Oh.
So that was another scarlet letter. But I did walk into Akron United Methodist Church, and I got welcomed.
Good.
For the first time. They opened their arms, and one of the patrons there, her name is Susie Baker, she walked right up to me, and she goes, welcome. She goes, you hungry?
That's a good church.
And I thought, oh my God, she had no idea. Not only was I physically hungry because we didn't have a pot or a window to throw it out, I was physically hungry, and God, I just wanted to be loved. And I got married, and I couldn't even get loved in the course of a marriage. So here I am just starving. And she just really, truly changed my life. She opened her home. The church opened their family to me. They embraced me. They celebrated me. I got to do my first Emmaus walk. That was incredibly empowering for me.
Yeah.
I got to walk through the Bible, do a whole winter season through the Bible.
Sure. So you've started out about as bad as you can get. And along the line, you somehow found your voice in a lot of ways. To stand up to the incest, to stand up then to a man trying to redirect your path, and now you're in a situation, but you found a church, so you've begun to feel that love that you so desperately need.
Now I'm going to go backward in time. Okay, so I'm in college. This is before I started histology. And in college, you got to do all those core classes. One of them was psychology. And in psychology, they talk about a lot of difficult things, schizophrenia, mental illness. And for our final, we had to pick a topic and talk about how it affects, the human body. A lot of people chose like bulimia and anorexia. Well, that was my one chance. I'm 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to choose molestation. So I read book after book after book to see how people live with that. In one of the books, in several of the books, it talked about confronting the person.
Yeah.
In hopes that they would say, I'm sorry.
Sure.
But more realistic, just to say, I need you to know how your actions
Affected me.
changed my life. And a lot of my classes were split. So I'd have like a 8 to 10, and then I'd have a 1 to 3. So I didn't want to drive all the way back to Manchester because I was going to school in Fort Wayne. And one of my next youngest brothers had a house there, and he's like, sis, just go over and, get a sandwich or whatever. So I'd always go over there and make a salami, onion, and mustard sandwich. It was my favorite.
And go right back to class, huh?
I look forward to that. Well, one day I went over there to get a sandwich, and my brother was there. The one that I had all these terrible nightmares with. In the moment, I panicked and I ran out, and I drove, and I cried and I cried, and I was angry. I was so angry. I couldn't love anyone because of him.
You couldn't even love yourself.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I got the courage to go back to that house when my brother was there. And it's my mother's firstborn son.
Yeah.
And his name is Les. And he was there. And he said, hey, sis, how's it going? Just like nothing. And I could barely talk to him. And I said, Les, I want you to know something. I want you to know that what you did to me as a kid has ruined my life. And his reply was, kids experiment. It's not what I wanted to hear.
No.
So in my anger, I said to him, kids experiment. So boys experiment with little boys too? I said, you think I don't remember what you did to Lonnie? He's the next one, oldest. I said, I remember what you did to Lonnie. Was that an experiment too? He goes, you're not the only one that had that happen to you. I said, I can tell you this. I would never inflict what you did to me on another human, knowing that it'll ruin their life for the rest of their lives. And he rambled on, but I could barely hear him in my anger. So I was done with the conversation because I knew I wasn't going to get, I'm sorry. So I walked right up to him, and he's 6'3". He's very tall. And I tapped him on his chest, and I said, you know what? If I had a gun, I wouldn't shoot you here. And then I pointed between his legs, and I said, I'd shoot you there. So the next time you give love, you think of me first. And then you'll know what you did to me. And I walked out. And then he killed himself.
Wow.
And then the wrath of my mother ensued. 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Holidays stopped. Birthdays done.
Yeah.
She had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Because I had killed her firstborn. So then if I spring forward, I went to his funeral. I knelt down. I said the Lord's Prayer. But I didn't want
You
him to
didn't
kill
feel it.
himself.
Yeah.
But I was still angry.
Yeah.
So then if I spring forward to my autopsies, I got called one Sunday morning for a young girl that was 10 years old who lived in a neighboring town from here, who got hit by a minivan riding her bicycle at 9:30 at night. So, whenever you hear these topical stories, you always populate an opinion. You think,
Right.
where in the heck was that girl's parents, right? Why was that baby on a bike at 9:30? It's almost dark. Well, when I went in to get my little girl from the cooler and I put her on the table, I mean, she's just this tiny little, blameless, beautiful kid. And before we start our autopsies, you always kind of thumb through the chart to see kind of what you're getting into, if
Sure.
there was any history you're looking for or whatever. And I quickly learned that her father was in prison for molesting her. Her mother was no longer in the picture. She actually lived with her grandparents. And that there was a concern that perhaps that abuse, her sexual abuse, had not stopped.
Oh my gosh.
So I went back into that room with that little girl and that table, and there was obvious chronic healing, re-tearing,
Yeah.
chronic healing, re-tearing to her genitals. And then I realized that little lady was probably running away.
Yeah.
So then for the first time in my entire life, I had to look at that 10-year-old, knowing that my abuse stopped when I was about 8 years old. And if I could see her as blameless, why have I been spending the last 25 years of my life blaming myself for this? That was a huge spiral for me. That was a huge spiral. I called the pathologist and I told him what I had seen. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be transparent with you. I have a history of sexual abuse and I cannot do this autopsy. And he said, Bernadette, we're not doing this autopsy. She's going to forensics. So I was like, thank God. So she got merged over to St. Joe where they had a forensic pathologist, and that was done. And then my day was already planned the weekend. I was supposed to meet my girlfriends and go out on the boat and be girls, right?
Yeah.
So I got out there to the lake and I told my girls where I was at in my head, and they're just like, Bernadette, have a beer. I don't know, try to relax.
Yeah.
And it was such a downward spiral. They had my son. They were watching my son while I had the autopsy. And Michael was about 5 years old. And at the end of that, I did not want to drive my son home. So I asked my girlfriends to go ahead and take him back to Manchester, and I'd meet up with them. I stopped at Jellystone Park on my way back from Syracuse to Manchester, and I walked a lot of paths that I had walked before, where I'd made a lot of poor decisions. And in that moment, I called my mom. And I was so mad at her.
Sure.
Because then it hit me that what she did was wrong.
Yeah.
She should have been on my side.
Yeah.
She should have helped me.
She should have protected you.
Just like that little girl should have had somebody there for her. And my mom just wanted to know where I was. Where are you right now? Where are you right now? Of course, this is after Les had killed himself. And I said, you know what, Mom? You had a chance to protect me. You don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you where I am because you don't deserve that. And I terminated that conversation, and I came back to Manchester where my son was sleeping because it was quite late at night at that time. my headspace was terrible. And I realized that some of my friends weren't probably the most optimal friends to have, at that time. And they offered me an escape by just inhale this, Bernadette.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was, and they didn't really want to tell me what it was, because probably if they had told me, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I just remember seeing this piece of foil, and there was some residue on it, and they took a pop bottle and they cut the lid off of it, and they put a fire underneath it, and when the smoke came up, they said just inhale through the lid of the pop bottle lid. And it was actually cocaine.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember in that moment that it wasn't what I thought drugs were going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never done drugs. I mean, my brothers were plagued with drugs their entire life. They were in and out of like institutions. They were really rough kids. Mm-hmm. And I never got in trouble. Mm-hmm. I always thought I was the good one, but I could just never get the grace or the love for it. But, when I inhaled that, I felt like in that moment my thoughts were more clear and that I could see the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. You have to forgive me because I've never told this to anyone. So,
wow.
But I could separate the emotion from the thought, which was really good for me in that moment. And I could see that what was wrong was wrong.
Right.
Due to, doing that, I called my son's father and I told him what I had just been through, and he knew my sexual abuse history, and that's probably, was a huge problem for our relationship. And I said, I need you to take Michael for me, my son. And he goes, okay. And I mean, he wasn't the best at weekend visits and that, but thank God he stepped up at that moment in time. I continued to spiral with the use of cocaine for almost a whole week.
Wow.
And it was after maybe 4 or 5 days that, the core of me came forward and said, Bernadette, this is so much bigger than you are.
Yeah. You
can't do this.
Yeah.
So I looked to the Lord, where will my help come from? And I went back to my house, and I remember 24 hours of trying to come off of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so thankful that I was able to do it.
Wow.
And then never touched it again.
Wow. I'm sitting here thinking, none of this is what I thought we were going to talk about, but God is doing what God is doing here. And thank you for sharing. I mean,
yeah,
this is amazing. You're amazing.
When I say I don't know the girl that sits here, I'm so thankful for her. She's been down a long road.
Sure. But every piece of that along the way, God has always been with you. You've known that from the very beginning.
He just keeps putting people in my place, in my path. And yeah.
And sometimes it's the willingness to walk the journey, even if you know it's the wrong one, right? You knew in the initial, this is not really where I should be going, but
I wanted to die.
You had to get to that place. I wanted to
leave this earth, but I didn't want to leave my son.
Sure.
That was the only light in this life that I had, and he was perfect.
So here you are at the worst, the absolute worst, ready to just be done with it all. But somehow you came out of that to be brave enough to be the woman who would get in an airplane and fly off to help people in a whole nother world. Mm-hmm. And so what God planted in you then has made you this now. So how did you get to that place of that dark, dark place to this place of light that you're in now?
So that church in Akron, when I was in that terrible marriage for about 10 months, they showed me there was a different way to live.
Okay.
And they believed in me. I don't even know what they were believing in.
They saw something and you couldn't.
They saw
You
something
couldn't
I
see.
didn't. I was like, well, I don't know why they're so nice. I mean, I don't have anything to buy you. I was terrible cook.
Have no money, can't cook a thing.
I don't know what to do, but I'll keep showing up. And at one point, my son's grandmother, his dad's mom, and her new husband offered me an opportunity to go down to Indianapolis to this thing called Beyond Your Best. I don't know what it is. She goes, it'll make you a better person. And I was like, oh, Lord, she did not say that to me because I thought, number one, there is nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with me. But I knew that she had paid a lot of money for me to go down to this thing. So I did.
Okay.
And the rules were you couldn't have like a psych history. There was no drinking, no smoking. You had to be clean that whole time and you had to show up. So I went just as naive as all get out. I'm now 30 years old. I just turned 30. I'm living in Manchester with my son. And this Beyond Your Best there was like 58, 57 people in my group. So it's all just strangers, random people in walks of life, every age group represented. And of course, when they start talking about everything, does anybody want to introduce themselves or something? And of course, I'm like, I'm getting this out of the way. I sprung up like a little spring bunny.
Listed
and
all
I
the
said,
bad things that you could think of.
well, no, I didn't say nothing. No, I had to create the image. You know? So I sprung up and I said, my name is Bernadette Yaney. I'm from North Manchester, Indiana. I'm in nursing school and I'm single. And I just hope that, maybe I'll meet people. And I'm so thankful that guy let me sit down. Because the next person that stood up, well, they were divorced. And I didn't mention that, right? They were divorced. Well, why are you divorced? Oh, well, he cheated on me. Okay, so let's go back further. Why did he cheat on you? And then they started like picking apart people's lives. And I was like, oh, Lord, this is going south.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize he's not here for the short and fluffy. He's here to get down to the dirty. That, and through this course of 4 days, we did exercise after exercise games that allowed you to see how you play the game of life. For instance, when we walk up to someone, we all stood in 2 rows facing each other, 4 feet across. You looked at that person and you had to make an instant decision of 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you had to hold that number up. 1 means I want nothing to do with you. Please don't look at me or make eye contact with me. 2 means I'll look at you, but you're sketchy and I don't feel comfortable around you. 3 says, I'll shake your hand, but that's as far as I go. And 4 says, you look like somebody who could be my family, and you hug them. So we did this.
Oh,
we had to
gosh.
go through each and every person. And I remember this older gentleman in his 50s. He had jean overalls on, and I just felt a little like uncomfortable. And I did the number 2 to him. He instantly started crying. He was a grandfather.
Oh.
He was a wonderful, kind man, but I chose to judge what I seen.
Yeah.
And but then there was a lot of people that I just openly hug. I'm a hugger. I touch. Love to me is touch. And then we'd play games like this one was called Red and Black. They split us in half, 2 groups. And they gave us no rules. They just said that if your group chooses red and their group chooses red, you both get 1 point. If you choose red, they choose black, they get 2 points. If you guys choose different, it was just like this little number thing. But they split us into 2 rooms and then they said nothing. So now we're sitting here with 20-some people in the room. Somebody's got to do something. Otherwise, nobody's going to talk. So, of course, I stood up and I said, okay, how do you guys want to play this? You want to play to win? Do you want to play to lose? Or do you want to break even?
Yeah.
And then there was people saying, I'm playing to win. Well, let's see how they play. So then the colors would start coming and we'd see that they were trying to play to win. And then some people would be like, well, I'm not breaking it. I'm not going easy on them. But the whole thing, when it wrapped up, was how did you play the game of
Yeah.
life? That's the game of life.
Yeah.
So did you sit and let everybody make decisions for you?
Yeah.
Did you stand up and say, let's try this? That was eye-opening to see how something as simple as that little game shows you in your course of your life. How do you show up? And they allowed us to populate an idea of what we wanted for our lives. So I chose to say, I am a beautiful, confident leader. And you had to say that until it was believable. And if you said it kind of meek and mild, they would call bullshit. And then you had to say it again and say it again until you said it with enough
Wow.
energy that it was actually believable. So they're building me on the inside,
Sure.
and I'm just trying to play the games, right? And at one point, we have to stand in front of everybody, and we had to talk about, those dirty, dark things.
Yeah.
So I stood in front of everyone and told them that I had been sexually abused for the first 8 years of my life, and it was my fault. Because they said, if you own it, now you're in control again. So, and I always blame myself anyway.
Yeah.
So it was easy for me. I stood right up there proud as a peacock. I said, and I own it. It was my fault. And then the guy said, what? And I was like, what do you mean what? He said, you don't get to own that. I said, oh, yes, I do. And I said, let me tell you why. I remember one specific incident where my brother brought in a little radio. We were poor. We didn't have no radios. It was one that you could like put batteries in or plug into the wall. And I wanted that radio. And I knew that radio had a cost. And I chose that radio. He said, you don't get to own that. That's not yours to own. So then I had this confirmation in my head that maybe it's not my fault. Maybe it's not my fault because I was a girl. Maybe it's not my fault because I chose the material thing. And then it wasn't very long after that I just got to really see who I was. The last and final game that they played, they gave everybody 3 popsicle sticks. And they said that the world is coming to an end. There is one lifeboat. There is only 3 seats in that boat. If you want to be in that lifeboat, if you want to plead your case to the people that are here, plead your case now. And now I felt I had confirmation that it was not my fault. So I stood up and I told everyone that I had lived feeling less than, and I lived being safe and comfortable. But I said, I know that I am a beautiful, confident leader, and there is more in me, and I will reach people. I will look for those little underdogs that are suffering. I said, but I want to be in that boat. I want to raise my son. 58 people stood in a complete circle, and in 4 points on that circle, they pulled one person off. You had to turn to the person to your left. You had to call them by their name. If you didn't remember their name, you needed to tell them, I'm sorry, I didn't care enough to learn your name. And then once you said their name, you either gave them a life seat in that boat, or you said, I'm sorry, you're not going to be in that lifeboat, and you moved on to the next person. We had to go around every person.
Oh, wow.
And there was a couple people that I couldn't remember their names, and that was so painful to tell them, I didn't care enough. I didn't care enough to remember your name. But when the end of that was done, I had one of the seats in that lifeboat. And though it was a game, it was very real in my head. And I promised God that I was not going to forsake this. I was not going to let this slide. There's a country music song that says, I want to be somebody someday. You can bet your hard-earned dollar I will. I sang that like an anthem from the age of 13 forward. And I promised God in that moment that I was going to be somebody. I was going to be somebody. And then I finished nursing school. I started in the emergency room right off the bat. One of the prayers I asked for right after the failed marriage was, I said, Lord, I can't pick them. If they're not for me, turn their eyes from me. May they find me repulsive in their eyes. I don't care. And I tried dating toads, and they turn their eyes. So you got to be careful what you ask for. Lord, he's listening. I'm telling you, all the time he's listening. But then I decided after being in the nursing or into the emergency room after 6 months, I thought to myself, well, I'm ready to grow. So my son and I sat down. We flipped through all 50 states, and we picked California. We were going to move to California. And I got my passport, and when I was walking out of the post office, my husband, John Clark, was walking in, and as I opened the door, I seen this good-looking fella, rugged. He said, Bernadette Yaney. And it just like echoed through my core. It's like, I don't know. It was like he called me. And I couldn't remember his name. I remembered that I'd met him at Sun Metal in the shipping department. And then that weekend, I went to get some vegetables up at the next town up 13 North. I can't think of the railroad tracks. But I went to get my vegetables. And sure enough, the girl I graduated high school, we also worked at Sun Metal together. And I asked her, I said, what was that fella's name in the shipping department? She goes, that was John Clark. And I was like, is he married? And she's like, no, John never married. And he's got a daughter. And I was like, he's got a daughter? He's about the same age as your son. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And then my son and I went to the grocery store to get some milk. And now I seen this fella all cleaned up. And my son's yanking on my arm, said, Mom, we came for milk. I said, I'm about to get me some digits. I said, come on, boy, give me a minute. I mean, he was handsome. He smelled good. He was tall. And so
he came from milk, but you came for something else, huh?
Yes. Oh, he was so handsome. And then my neighbor, Janae Renz, she invited me to go. She was like a sister to me. Her parents are now whom I call my parents. She invited me to go to a softball game with her daughter. And my son was like, wow, she's really popular, Mom. And I'm like, well, if it's going to benefit you, we can go. I don't know what I'm going to do. So we went to the softball field, and sure enough, John's daughter played on the same team.
God worked all that out for you.
Oh, he did. He truly did. And I eventually got to talking to John, and we got to have a date, and I told him that, we were moving to California, and he house sat for me. And during the week that I was gone doing the job interviews, he sent me a letter and said that, he's always wondered what happened to me. And that, if there was any chance that he could be a part of my life, that he wanted to be a part of my life. And I forwarded that email to my father, who was still very much a part of my life. And he said, girl, what are you thinking? Get your butt home. And then John and I got married 6 months later.
Oh, wow. The rest is history.
The Lord has just blessed me beyond measure.
Yeah. And here you are.
And here I am.
So how many years have you been married then?
16 years
16 years.
We just celebrated 16 this last month. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
And then you get on another plane and you fly off to Alaska.
Yeah, both of our kids graduated. We were like in our 30s. I was 38. He's 37. We're empty nested. That was a transition.
Yeah.
So I promised my son once I got that nursing degree that I wouldn't go back to school again until he graduated. And sure enough, when he graduated, I told John, I said, I got to go back. And he's like, okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I got my bachelor's degree and then went right on to my master's to get my nurse practitioner. And then...
what led you to Alaska? What led you to that?
Well...
That's a big decision.
After getting all those beautiful degrees, I was $120,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah, so that'll change your life.
I was like, boy, oh boy, this is killing me. So, I tried, doing various jobs and paying it, but I just wasn't getting anywhere. 6%, 7% interest was just killing me. And then in the face of COVID, we had a lot of people that just floated in and out of the clinics to help us. And one of them was talking about how some nurse practitioners were going to Alaska to pay off their student loan debts because they paid really well up there and they had forgiveness or something. So I said something to my husband. Of course, I think he just kind of rolled his eyes like, no, you're not going to Alaska. What are you talking about, woman? And I was like, man, if I could just go for a year. And then I was trying to do the numbers. I'm like, man, if I could do it for 1 year, I could wipe out that debt. You know, I was down to like 50 some thousand by then. And I bumped into the right person, and he said, where have you been all my life? This is my boss up there now, my boss now. He's like, I've been looking for you. And again, my husband's like, you're not going to Alaska. You are not. And there was all these options you could choose. You know, there's like 15 different villages, and the Bering Sea is St. Paul Island. My husband said, I am not getting in a plane going there, so you're not going there either. I'm like, okay, so there's inland places. And then sure enough, there was Lake Clark. I'm like, well, my name's Bernadette Clark.
There you go.
I said, the Lord must be calling me there.
Yeah.
So one of my ER physicians, he said, he goes, yeah, Port Ulster is pretty good. He goes, there are a bunch of Bible thumpers over there, Bern. You'd probably be all right there. So sure enough, they flew me up for a site visit, and it was like incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
no stores. You can't you can't run away. Once they drop you off, you're stuck. And then I came back home, and then when we did the number thing back and forth, and the numbers panned out, and I was like, John, I'm doing this. He's like, I don't know, but we did it. And then, wow. So going to Alaska, I read about it. There's tons of incest and sexual abuse and violence, and I thought, well, that's probably what the Lord's sending me there for. I already got, all this experience, and I've learned how to grow from it. So I thought, all right, Lord, I guess I can dig into that. I mean, it's not fun to, but that Beyond Your Best got me to a point in my head where that's just a chapter in this big, huge book of life,
Right.
It doesn't define me.
Right.
It's just something that I have been through.
Yeah.
So going to Alaska made sense. I was like, well, I've got all the sexual abuse, so that's probably what the Lord's going to use me for up there. And then I got there.
And he used you for something totally different, didn't he?
And the Lord, he's got his own agenda.
Yeah.
So I just fell into acclimating to being completely by myself. No friends, no family, no, I don't know anybody, and adjusting and just practicing family medicine. The other nurse practitioner that was there was not as people loving as I am. I've just always loved people. And before I knew it, I was there 3 months, and then she had given a 14-day notice, but she didn't have the heart to tell me until it got down to 10.
Oh, wow.
So when it hit the 10 days, she said, by the way, I'm going home in 10 days. In 10 days? So I'm going to be here by myself? And literally just the night before, we had a guy come in with a heart rate of 188, which to take care of a patient like that, you have to push medication that literally turns your heart off in hopes that your brain will restart it. This is a 2-person thing because you may have to shock, CPR. This is a big deal. So now I'm going to be a 1-person clinic. What am I going to do? Oh, man, I prayed and prayed, Lord, I got to get smarter faster. How am I going to
multiply yourself?
How am I going to do this? So then I reached out to the community and I said, if anybody has had medical training, wants to learn medical training, come to the clinic on Saturday. I'm going to have a bunch of food. I need help. And 21 people showed up.
Wow.
21, mostly children, showed up.
Yeah, I've seen pictures.
And of the 21 people, only 2 of them had ever had any historical medical anything. One was an EMT 14 years ago, and the other one had been like a medical assistant in a family doctor's office. But other than that, no medical training. So I committed to them that I would teach them everything I know in hopes that together we could actually literally save each other, because otherwise we're in trouble.
Wow. How much time do we have? We've gone over. We're going to keep going.
We are over, but yeah, if you can find a segue to land the plane.
Okay.
Okay. This is, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was going to be this. This is amazing.
This is amazing.
Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Tragic, but amazing.
tragically beautiful.
It is tragically beautiful. Unbelievably believable.
Unbelievably believable. So, needless to say, these 21 kids committed to me. They committed to the community.
Yeah.
Within 2 months, 13 were certified as wilderness first responders. 8 more were certified as ETTs, which is like an EMT in
Yeah.
the lower 48. God has literally walked every footpath with me. February the 14th or February the 15th, every month on the 15th, we did training. And we would learn to extricate in the field, package, and bring them back to the clinic. And then they would stay with me in that clinic, and we would do IVs, get EKGs, put them on bear huggers, splint wounds, wash wounds, suture,
Do what you need.
everything. And the training that we did in February set us up for our first tragic accident. At the end of the month, 11 days later, we had a frozen girl on the
Yeah.
lake.
Yeah.
So
So everything you have been through,
everything.
every piece that you thought was the broken piece, that was the last piece, the last thing that broke off of you that could get you going, all of that God took and put together the way He needed it to be put together to make you who you are today.
Yes.
And as we shared earlier, what would happen to some of those kids if you had not have gone and had not have had all the experiences that you've already had to speak into their lives? And I have lots and lots and lots of questions. So you're just going to have to come back.
I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, because I've just let you, I wanted you to just tell your story. I said to you earlier, just tell whatever you want, not knowing that this is what was going to pour out of you. But so grateful that it has. But you've got to come back. You've got to finish the story with us, maybe a couple of times even, because God has used you in powerful ways.
Or you guys can come up to Alaska.
Yes.
Only if he's paying.
Do you know that the scenery is really dialed in? And I have the perfect place with the beautiful mountain view.
We
We could pack the gear up and go tomorrow. It's that simple.
You might be able to.
My wife probably wouldn't. Yeah.
I have a flexible schedule.
You have a flexible schedule.
I can make it work.
I don't know who's paying for this trip. There's not that much
We'll
money in
figure it-
admissions,
we'll
but
figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, but literally, even the darkest places in my life, I lived those so that I could come to Alaska. So that I
you did.
could
You did. You really did.
be this
You
girl.
really did. And I know Alaska's in darkness now, but you're the light there.
Yeah.
You're the light there. And
God is my light.
Yeah, I mean, but you carry that with you. You carry that with you. So, well, we've got to finish up.
Okay,
So
let's do it.
We will. But do you want to pray us out, or
Let's do it.
okay, go for it, girl.
Sweet Heavenly and Faithful Father, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and this space.
Just bless it.
Lord, I'm so grateful that one outreach brought me to the Congregational Christian Church and their devotion to help others, to help my first response team. Lord, thank you for this place to feel safe and to deliver my story. My goal is that my words echo in the hearts of someone else. I pray that they see that what develops us, what frames us, does not define us, and that your grace and your love is ever present and never failing. In your precious name, we pray that you continue each and every day with us and that we continually seek you. In your precious name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Amazing.
Oh, it's a skinny branch, boys and girls. I've never told those stories.
Are you okay with the Marin?
Yeah, I mean, it's me, it's my story.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want somebody to think that my life's been a crystal stair.
Yeah. None of ours have.
And I don't think you can achieve greatness without surviving
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you use the terms walk my path, that you didn't stop walking your path, even in the darkness. You just kept going to the next lighted spot.
Yeah.
And when it got dark there, God just pushed you on to the next lighted spot. And on the whole way, he was just making you who he needed you to be to serve him in the way that he needs you to serve, and not in the way that you think you should serve. You said, I'm going to go to Alaska to serve, kids who are, dealing with molestation. No. You had a bigger plan than that. We do that to ourselves. We set ourselves up for what we think God's going to do with us, when he's like, no, that's not it. That's not it at all. Thank you for sharing.